Welcome, YouTube friends and family, to episode 2 of talking about building a long-term pantry. So as I was thinking through some of the things we talked about on Tuesday's video, I realized I didn't really talk about how to store, not where, but how to store all the items. So as you begin to build your long-term pantry, you're going to need a few supplies. I hope you'll stay tuned to find out what I'm speaking of. So today you find me in my somewhat messy long-term pantry. I know where everything is, but there are still a few things I need to take care of. I need to spend a day or two in here. You know, that just seems to be the never ending. So let's talk a little bit about protecting your very valuable food storage or your prepper pantry, whatever you want to call it. I prefer just to call it food storage. So we all know that you should keep your food in a cool spot, 50 to 70 degrees. You want it dark and you want it without moisture, so clean and dry. And a lot of references that I read said don't store things on the floor. I understand the reasoning behind that from a pest or rodent standpoint. I don't have that issue. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but as y'all know, I have so many stray cats. I have never had a rodent problem here. So I don't worry a whole lot about it. And of course, this is stored inside my house. So what are the enemies to our very valuable food storage items? Well, kind of the converse of how you should store it. So extreme temperatures. It could even be freezing, but it's mostly heat, light, moisture, pests, those sorts of things. So you want to really protect your investment as you're building your pantry so that you don't lose your hard-earned cash and your hard work and not have usable food. Now, I will be up and down during this video, partially because there's a little too much Kym for this stool. So this stool, y'all, let me just share this with you, is near and dear to my heart because see all the paint and such on it? That stool for years was in my mom and dad's home. And my mom being like only this tall needed a stool for everything. But my dad painted and drywalled everything on this stool. So, you know, it's kind of a family heirloom at this point. Okay, so let's switch gears and start talking about grains. So one of the things, pardon me, that prompted me to start talking to you about food storage and food safety was some of the questions that I got on our Tuesday video. And the first question that I received was, do you freeze your oats? Now, let me just show y'all this. These are quick oats. I only have like 2 recipes I ever use quick oats for, so not a whole lot. Should they be stored here? We're going to talk about that. But the question was, do you freeze, in addition to your flours or grains, do you freeze oats? And I honestly never have. Do I have like a big bucket of oats? I do. They are rolled oats, like the long cook oats, and that is my preference for cooking. I have never had a problem with weevils, which is the little black bugs that can get into your food supply. So for rice, oats, flours, and whole grains, we should be, and guys, this is more do as I say, not as I do. I mean, there's going to be things I'm going to tell you that I'm remiss on or I'm not doing well. Freeze them first for 48 hours. Why? That's going to kill not only any weevils, it's going to kill any eggs. Once you pull those packages or the big bags out of your freezer, you want to let it come back up to room temperature slowly. Like I'll leave it a week, and y'all have seen bags sitting here, and they're safe for very short term because we've already frozen them. So many commercial grain producers add something that you might not have known to your grain supply, and that is DE, or diatomaceous earth. So what is it? Well, diatoms are little microscopic creatures. It's the fossils of them that came out of the water. And it's a very fine white powder. I use it in my chicken coop. You've heard me talk about, you know, spraying lightly their bedding. So what happens is, like hard shell type bugs get scratched because the DE has very sharp surfaces. Not that we can perceive, you know, if you ingest a little bit of it, but to a very small creature, it will scratch their shells, their protective coating, cause them to dehydrate and pass away. So that's how we get rid of those type of pests in the US anyway, in some of the big commercial factories. Another thing to realize, y'all, and I hadn't really thought about this, some of our big box stores like the Costco's, the Sam's, we don't have Costco near me. The closest Sam's is about 40 minutes. So when I want to go to Sam's, I wait until I go up to my son's because he has a Sam's membership and it's super close to where he lives. So why would that be a more risky buy? Well, you have to realize it's bulk goods. They're selling in huge quantities, and they may have pests, which is just part of having a large food storage in a commercial setting. So you always want to freeze. I'm going to start freezing my oats, not the ones I've been using because they're absolutely fine, but it can happen. Definitely can happen. So let's see. Then what do you do? Okay, so you've frozen them, you've thawed them, they've come to room temperature. And why do I say thaw them before you store them? In case there's any moisture in them, you want that to go ahead and dry out or evaporate. One of the best ways is to store your items in food grade buckets with a Gamma Seal lid. So let me stand up here. We're going to pull one out and I'm going to show you what it looks like. And y'all, this may be too like basic 101, but maybe there's a few tidbits. Oh my word, this is heavy. So, ignore the dust. Oh my goodness. So this is all-purpose flour pre-ground. So I purchased my food grade buckets from Azure. I have not been able to find them any less expensive. So this is tightly sealed, and the lid is in two separate pieces like this. So you can seal this very tightly. The opaque nature is going to prevent any deterioration, hopefully, of your grains or whatever you're storing in these buckets, whether it's rice or oats or whatsoever. So I have found this to be the best way to keep items fresh, and it's a one-time investment. But I thought, you know, if someone has never built a food supply and maybe they have a week or two and they want to move up to a month or 3 months, they may need to know what supplies do I really need and what don't I really need. So I have a ton of these buckets because I put every kind of grain in it. Oh my word, y'all, I'm sorry. Okay. So, oh, got my watch stuck there. So this is a cardboard package. This is not the best way to store things. So I need to get like a little mason jar or something to put the rest of these oats in to really have them stored at the best freshness guarantee, I guess you would say. Oh. Now I've got flour on my britches. All right. You can, let's say, first of all, you don't really want to talk to my neck, I don't think. Let's say you have a large family and you're purchasing from Azure or other Amish or Mennonite supply stores or just bulk goods stores. You know, maybe like the Costco's and Sam's. I've never purchased in bulk from either of those places. I've always used Azure. But at any rate, maybe you decide, I'm just going to stock up. I know this is something that we use on the regular, like a bread flour. Let's just use that as an example. So maybe you have 2 bread flour buckets or even 3. Many people will put a couple things in there to help deter pests. The first, and I think most of us have heard of this, is bay leaves, because that is a natural pest repellent. But also I've seen people put oxygen absorbers into their buckets to, you know, if they're really, really shopping long term. One of the gals commented that she does things a little bit differently, and I really admire her. She goes once a year and purchases everything that she needs. Wow, I bet that's a big shopping trip. It would be for me, because how do I know what I need? But we're going to talk about that in upcoming videos. And y'all, not every single video is going to be about pantry. But this is something I thought, you know, I kind of got the cart before the horse, and I talked about the why, but I didn't really talk about the how. All right. So let me show you something. Like I said, I'm going to be up and down a lot, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. But let's take a look at this. Oh. Now, I had shared in an earlier video that I am not the drop coordinator for Azure anymore. Not because I got fired, because I turned it over to someone younger who has small children who maybe could use the credit on their account. But the main reason is there's one thing about Azure I don't like, and I'll just say it. You kind of never know when they're coming, and then there can be delays in transport. And so it became a hindrance to me making long-term plans, because we even got deliveries on Saturday and Sunday, anywhere from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. That just didn't work out well for me, because I want to be available to go to my sons whenever I feel like it. Don't tell me what to do. But I really like Azure, y'all. You cannot beat their prices on whole grains if you're grinding your own grains. You cannot beat their prices on buckets, and certain jars are very, very fairly priced. Spices, unbelievable savings. So here's an example, guys. You know, I am so sorry. I have had terrible hiccups. Okay, so these are bay leaves. Let me show you these. They smell good. I'm just going to pick up one. Look how big that is. Yeah, it's almost as big as my head. No, I'm kidding. But you can see it's very large. Before I ordered from Azure, I had gotten, I was making something and I like needed it immediately. I bought like McCormick or a name brand, because they didn't have any store brands. Little jar. Oh my word. They were like, I will call you mini leaf. So having these nice big bay leaves, so economical, has been a great help for me. You just got to remember to take them out, because you don't want to eat them. All right. So you do want to label, and you probably should date all of your big buckets, your food storage buckets. One of the dilemmas I have is I don't have a lot of spare buckets. So let's say I have this much flour and I want to go ahead and put a new bag in. You need to dump the older material out into a bowl, into a bucket, whatever, a food grade bucket. Put in your new supply and then add your old on top. I mean, I think that's common sense, right? So packaging in the stores. So packaging like this. Right? Packaging like this. This is a 25-pound bag of all-purpose pre-ground flour that I like to keep on hand, but it would not fit in my bucket. and I really don't have room for, nor do I have a spare bucket. So you might want to consider at least one floating bucket so that you can offload the older material before you add the new material. So those type of packaging, one is, what do you call that? It's not cardboard, it's a paper of sorts. This is a combo of cardboard with a plastic lid that does not even seal very well. Most store packaging, when you're bringing something home, it's packaged to last till your best by date. So that is a good way to think about it. Let's say you're buying, Quick Oats, right? Well, I know I'm going to use those up by the best by date just because of my cadence of when I use them for apple crisp or cookies. I'm not using them as quickly as I used to because this girl can't eat that stuff anymore. Well, I could, but I won't. So there are other storage methods. Let's say the bucket, you're just like, yeah, no. I did not have buckets at first. If y'all have been around a while, you will remember I did not have buckets. So let's talk next about some Myer bags. So purchasing buckets or bags or oxygen absorbers or any of the things we're going to talk about today do add a cost to your long-term food storage. I always like to go to the reusable. So the buckets, reusable. Jars, which we'll talk about in a minute, totally reusable. What can be somewhat reusable are Myer bags. So let me just show you here. I do keep some ready-made meals that I have made, run through my freeze dryer, and put on the shelf. So this is the actual Harvest Right Myer bags. And you can see it's sealed at the top. It's dated. This is from April of 22. I am not worried about this. Depending on the source that you read, these can be good for up to 30 years. So it's impervious to light, it's impervious to moisture. But how do you seal the top? Well, y'all, when I first started using Myer bags, I used an iron and it worked just fine and it did not hurt my iron. I did put a press cloth over the metal just in case, the metal bag. And I just dropped some. You can use, I've seen people use hair straighteners. But with the Harvest Right freeze dryer, could I be any more disorganized? Let's see if I can lift this. Okay, I can't. You will get, depending on the package that you purchase, what's called an impulse sealer. Now, I have a rubber band around it just so that it doesn't flip all the way up and it's a little easier to store. So what this is it just has a little heating element here. And you simply push down, stick your bag in, push down, let up, and it will seal it very, very quickly. If you're using large bags, so here's an example of a very large Myer bag. So what would be examples of what I would keep in this? Well, I use a small amount of raw flour, but I find that it's a lot cheaper to buy it in 25-pound bags. So I will offload this, that 25 pounds into about 5 pounds or so each bag, and then I'll seal it. Now, as I use it or fill the container that I'm scooping from, you know, maybe the level goes down to here. You can reseal these. So they're not totally reusable, but if you have a large bag, you can cut it down and reseal it, and it's just as good as when you initially started to use it. Another item that I invested in because I don't want moisture getting into my freeze-dried goods, number one, or I wanted to remove as much oxygen as I could from the Myer bags so that my flour didn't go rancid. Now, I just grabbed, this is the Harvest Right oxygen absorber, and they're different sizes. So you need to make sure that you're using the right size for the quantity that you have. So they come sealed like this, and you notice they're sealed up at the top. So generally what I will do is put them in a jar and either vacuum seal them or let the oxygen absorbers vacuum seal it, but you can reseal it. It's just, you don't want to expose these to air for long periods of time, because then they will absorb oxygen before you ever get them into your packaging. So this particular box had 5 packets of 10 absorbers, so 50 absorbers at 300 cc's. So you may have to use more than one or buy a bigger oxygen absorber. So why are we pulling all the oxygen out of our products? Well, many products that are high in oil, so nuts and seeds and certain grains, can go rancid if they're exposed to too much air. So these are another great thing to have on hand. So let's talk a little bit about nuts and seeds. So this could be your garden variety peanuts, walnuts, pecans, or pecans, chia seeds, all those type of things, sunflower seeds. Many of those are high in oil. The best way to store them, if you're not going to use them relatively quickly, is in the freezer. They will last the longest there. So depending on the type of nut or seed, if you freeze them, they can last for 24 months. If you refrigerate them, they can last a year, but on the shelf, they may only last 6 months. I still vacuum seal my nuts, and I do keep quite a few things, you know, just vacuum sealed on the shelf. This is currants, almonds, those type of things, because I'm making granola, I'm making different things where I'm using them. I don't have a hugely robust stash of nuts and seeds, so I don't store them in my freezer, but that is the recommended method. Let's talk a little bit about salt. I alluded to this, y'all. So my favorite way to store salt, in the quantities in which I use them, you see the problem, is in these Azure Standard jars. What happens with salt? If you've ever been to a restaurant in a humid area, how they put rice in there to absorb the moisture. So this is pretty solidified up at the top, but still quite usable. Based on the research I did, the best way to store salt is in its original packaging. If you have very large quantities, I would go to the bucket method. I just underestimated, overpurchased, so I have enough salt to last me my natural lifetime, just saying. Sugar is another item that you do not want to put an oxygen absorber in, so salt or sugar, because what happens is it will just turn into a brick. Yeah, ask me how I know. And it can be really, really hard to get it out of the jar or the container that you've placed it in. So I simply fill up mason jars with items like salt and sugar, or these big Azure Standard jars that I just showed you. And I used to go through sugar quickly enough that it wasn't an issue. Now that I'm not using a whole lot of sugar, I will definitely decrease the amount I have on hand, increase the amount of artificial sweetener, doggone diabetes, but it will all even out. I will still use the sugar for certain things just call for sugar, and it's not that I can't have one speck of sugar, but also for making things for the holidays, for gifting, that type of thing. Chips and crackers. So what do they come in? Well, generally a cardboard box, and they have sleeves of crackers, depends on what you purchase. What I noticed, I just purchased club crackers for an event that I had, and I'm like, could they be wrapped in any thinner of a paper? Like it was see-through, it wasn't opaque. So here's a little tip for you, y'all. If you have a dehydrator and your crackers go stale, you can put them in the dehydrator for a couple hours, and it will pull that excess moisture out that's making them soft or soggy or unpalatable, and it will restore your crackers. You can do the same thing with chips. I don't eat chips. Chips aren't my thing, but I do like the Mexican chips, what are the tortilla chips? I do like those with salsa, but I go through this fast enough. We're in no danger of water getting into them. Things that are high in fat. Y'all, rancidity is just part of the nature of what happens to fat. That's why it's so important that you keep your pantry cool and dry and keep the lights off. I do not have the lights on in here unless I'm looking for something. I have full curtains covering the windows, and it's worked out really, really well for me. For me, because of the temperature variance in Ohio, it might be 100, it might be 20 below. I can't use my garage. That is not, and I would worry about pests too. That's just not a good storage area for me. I do want to talk a little bit about beans. So, I accidentally overbought Great Northern, but I like them, so it'll be fine, right? Is this the best way? No, it absolutely is not the best way for them to be stored. That's why I like the big 1-gallon jars from Azure. What is the downsize to the Azure 1-gallon jar? Well, I'm here to tell you, I have never found a way to vacuum seal them. So you can put the lid on tight, that's about it. So beans are supposed to be good forever, right? So you could store them in buckets, you could store them in Mylar. Getting them out of the plastic is key. You can store them in glass. The advantage to vacuum sealing them or putting oxygen absorber in is that if you don't do that and you don't have that stable environment, when it comes time to cook your beans, it may take longer. Well, I got nothing but time. No, I shouldn't say that, but I don't see that as a big enough detriment that I'm willing to go buy a whole bunch more buckets, because I don't keep huge quantities on hand. You can see a couple along here. So how do I keep talking about vacuum sealing? What's that all about? Well, guys, there's so many easy ways nowadays. So I've shared this device before. I believe it is linked in the description box. It is an off-brand electric mason jar vacuum sealer. I do not see a brand on this, but it does both narrow mouth and wide mouth jars. It is, you charge it via a USB port, wherever that went. Oh, on the top here. Guys, this works really well. It's convenient, it's quick. It kind of motivates me when I have done some bulk shopping to get things vacuum sealed up. I think this is the easiest way to do it. However, if you have a regular vacuum sealer, and I've shared this also many times on my channel. So this is a food saver that I bought at the Goodwill. And it comes with bags, but it also has this little attachment that you pull apart. See the little hole right here? When you hit vacuum seal, and I'm going to show you the food saver lids, it will actually suck all of the air out of the jar. So that is super convenient. However, I only have regular and wide mouth. You can also vacuum seal in bags. That's great for the freezer, because odor is another thing that can destroy our food supply. So you don't want to store, let's say, onions and garlic in a thin piece of saran wrap and think that it might not impact the taste of your food. So the food saver jar sealers, you have to buy one for regular, one for wide mouth. But see how it has the hole in the top and the rubber gasket? Why I moved away from this is because the rubber gasket has a tendency to fold when you're trying to get it on the jar. And it also has a tendency to roll up and can be hard for you to actually seal things. Once properly sealed, y'all, let me show you this. This is some shredded zucchini, see if I can read my own handwriting, that I freeze-dried and vacuum sealed 723. Lid's still sealed, contents are still dry, it's still perfectly usable. It makes a huge difference on herbs. And even though I cook a lot, y'all, so here's rosemary from this year. See how nice and dry that is? This really helps retain the flavor, prevents it from sucking back in some moisture. So I will reseal this. Sometimes I will wear a lid out, but generally they can be sealed many, many, many times. So some of you might be thinking, oh my word, I need all that. Y'all, not at first. Let me just share that with you. This, as I've shared before, has been a 5-year endeavor. And if you're working on, let's say, a month food supply that you're going to rotate out, so you have spaghetti once a week, so you buy some extra spaghetti. Well, as you date and rotate those out, you don't need to worry about all this long-term storage. But as you get past a month, and this is just my personal opinion, I think it makes sense to invest. If I only had one method of preserving, I think the safest are the buckets. However, if you're only buying this much and you only have this much in a 5-gallon bucket, it can be space prohibitive. So then I would go to, and I'm leaning here, I don't know if you can see, glass jars, because we can use them to can, we can use them for all sorts of things. And I also like the Myer bags as well, but they're a little more pricey per, because they're not as reusable, let's say, as the buckets and jars. So I hope this has been a very helpful video for you. If you're feeling like, I don't know what to do, y'all work on getting a month on your shelves if that's practical and affordable for you and your family. Depending on the size of your family, that may be quite an endeavor. If you don't have a first floor master that you can convert into a long-term pantry, where might you put all these things? The top of a closet. Even though it says don't store it on the floor, in a tote under the bed. There are so many different ways, and that's actually what my son did, and he also used some top shelving in his closet. So where there's a will, there's a way. Your guests might find cans of corn in your pantry, I'm sorry, you know, under your bed or in your dresser, but that's okay. That's okay. We need to do whatever works for our particular situation without breaking the bank. Y'all, I only had these two at first, then I added one, and then I added another one. So I certainly haven't done this all at once because the costs do add up and should be figured in to some of your food pricing. But I would still rather pay for the storage items and know I have that food security as to just kind of willy-nilly not worry about it. Remember 2020, guys. Remember the toilet paper shortage. And I also wanted to say some local friends who shopped in Cincinnati said there was absolutely no toilet tissue and no paper towels. And I'm like, okay, Cincinnati, Ohio has a huge factory, Procter & Gamble, and that's where most of our toilet tissue and paper towels come from. So you have to be smart and not just jump on the bandwagon that, oh, the ports may shut down, I need toilet tissue. You make it relevant to the event at hand. So I plan to see you all on Saturday, Lord willing. And if you would do me a big favor, go ahead and smash that like button. Drop me a comment below. What methods of food storage do you recommend? Because I see so many good tips from all of you, and I do appreciate each and every one of you. So until I see you again, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and take care.